don't know is that oil was actually discovered in Nigeria around 1908 by a British geologist named Albert Ernest Key, Keystone, if I remember his name right. Sir Walter Egerton was the Governor General of Southern Nigeria, and they had actually started producing oil in exportable quantities in this Niger Delta. But when World War One commenced, if you guys recall, Germany colonized Cameroon, Togoland, and Tanganyika and Namibia. So the British fear of Germany taking the oil in the south of Nigeria was what prompted them to shut down oil production. And then Britain focused on the oil in Iran. So they've been using Iran's oil ever since to power their navy. So Mr. James mentioned Mossadegh, the prime minister of Iran, that was actually ousted by the CIA. You have to recall that Britain was actually taking about like 95 to 90% of the oil revenues, and Iranians had nothing. That's why Mossadegh basically nationalized the oil assets. And this was also due to the fact that the US had a deal with Saudi Arabia where they were splitting the oil of Saudi Arabia, the profit 50-50. So that prompted the Iranians to actually act on that to like negotiate a better deal, which the British were not acquiescing to. So that led to the ouster of Mossadegh. Was assassinated, and then the Shah of Iran, or which Mr. James actually mentioned, came in. He had like death squad. He actually crushed dissidents. It was in the mosque that people were actually able to like structure themselves and overthrow the king, who was more or less British American puppet. We need to look at some correlations here. Apartheid South Africa was supported by US, Britain. They had a nuclear bomb. When Iran was also a US ally, they had a nuclear program. At some point where the friendship basically collapsed, Iraq, being assisted by the US and their allies, they actually gave Saddam chemical weapons to use against Iran, but the Iranians, they fought and they held their turf. It's equally the same hypocrisy we see when Israel has nuclear weapon. They never signed the NPT. They are not a member of the IAEA, but then they are expecting the Iranians, especially when the US intelligence actually said there is no sign whatsoever that they're actually developing nuclear weapon. So we can talk about like the enrichment level that's about 60%. It still doesn't mean they're actually going to create a nuclear bomb, because if you have a nuclear submarine program, you need an enrichment level of over 60 to actually get that working. Then you need to look at the fact that how many countries has Iran attacked? Yes, they may have their proxies, but Israel is also America's proxy. You look at the entire Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, UAE, they're all under the US pocket. They have military base across that region. If you look at oil prices from around 1930s to 1973, it was relatively flat. The time Israel attacked, the Arab war with Israel, they had their war, and then the king of Saudi, King Faisal, he was pissed at the Americans for supporting Israel. He then had this OPEC embargo where oil price shot up. You guys must be older to know at some point Naira had more value than the US dollar because of the oil price increase in the early 1970s. Well, what we don't know is that King Faisal, was actually assassinated. My roommates in college were from Saudi Arabia, so they know all this. So that King Faisal was assassinated, and then you have this petrodollar recycling system where any oil that the OPEC countries sell has to be sold in US dollar, regardless of who's buying it. It has to be sold in the US dollar, and then the profits, their savings, is actually recycled back to the US banking institution, basically buying back US debt. Basically, America is using their sales of oil to actually spend back home. So Iran is the only country that they don't control. And the banks in London, the banks in New York would like to have their hands on Iranian oil. So they will find different ways to go about taking their oil. the deal that Donald Trump was actually trying to do with the Iranians, negotiating the nuclear treaty and whatnot, it is very, very similar to the Anglo-Americans when they would have treaties with the Native Americans in the US. They will law them, give them a sense of security guarantee, only to scalp them and slaughter them. It's the same rule book that they are using. You see that same thing where the stuff is going on in Benue State. It's like apartheid in South Africa. The Brits would always leave their henchmen to rule their colony once they are leaving. The same thing is also going on in Nigeria, where they left the Fulani folks in charge. And there's killings going on in the Middle Belt. The Fulanis, not all, but some of them are actually our own version of apartheid or the Zionists in South Africa, actually laying waste to people left and right because of resources they have there. And all these resources they are taking in Nigeria from Plateau State to Benue, where are they going? They are going to the west. So it's I really like Mr. James' take on that. I think the war in the Middle East, Israel took forever to find the terrorists that actually kidnapped their people in the Gaza war, but they were very, very quick and precise to get the scientists, the military folks in Iran. Can't you see the distortion there? The Western nations or the global North, they've shown us a stark divide between the global North and the global South, and they will do whatever it takes to take what they want. If it means the Zionists, who the Europeans never really like, because we go back in history, it was the Europeans that executed the Jews long
All
before Hitler.
all
I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I'm almost
yeah,
done.
because we
I'm
have
almost
another
done. I'm
next.
almost done. I'm actually just concluding.
Okay.
The Ottomans that ruled Palestine, Jews were there. They didn't touch them. So the Western nations have showed us that if it means using the Fulani, not all Fulanis are bad in Nigeria. So I'm not saying, if it means using some of them to actually destabilize, which there is no reason, logical reason why they would want Nigeria, the largest black country, to do well. If it means they have to use people amongst us to divide, to destabilize us, it's the same thing they have to do to get hold of Iran, the last country, especially when the Bush administration said they are after Iraq, they will topple Sudan, Libya, Syria. So they are going about what they are doing very well. We have amnesia, we lack long-term memory, we don't think ahead. They don't forgive those they don't like. So that's all I have to say.